We are turning the tide in 2021. It was right here in St. Lucia in November 1994, 27 years ago, when the first conference on theology in the Caribbean today was born. Michel Devetai, the late Michel Devetai, Joe Harris, former Archbishop of Port of Spain, and myself, Patrick Anthony, we got together and conceived this notion of a conference, a movement, where we could bring in Caribbean thinkers, theologians, clergy, religious, catechists, to reflect on our Caribbean experience in the light of the gospel. What we call doing Caribbean theology today. It began, we call it Catholic Conference on Theology in the Caribbean today, or Theology Conference, which has now become what we call CTCT, Conference on Theology in the Caribbean today. Today, we are facing challenges, and this is why we invite you, as we turn the tide, to join us in reflecting on the COVID effect, turning the tide. Our conference this year, a virtual conference, from the 8th to the 12th of November. You can join us online, you can register online on social media, and join us in this process of reflecting on the challenges that the Caribbean is facing. We've had volcanic eruptions, we've had hurricanes, we have COVID. Now we want to reflect on what is God saying to us at this moment. So join us in our virtual conference from the 8th to the 12th of November. Register online. Our theme, the COVID effect, turning the tide.
Welcome everyone to the launch of the Conference on Theology in the Caribbean. Today, it's the launch of the virtual conference, the first virtual conference that this organization will be having, thrown into the tide, as it were, because of the pandemic that is happening right now. I am your host, Adana James, and I'm happy to be here with you this evening. And we have a wonderful lineup of persons who would be sharing with us about this conference and about what we can expect from this conference. And so we're going to have with us tonight Paba, as he's affectionately known, Monsignor Patrick Anthony of St. Lucia, cultural activist and priest. We also have the beloved Father Don Chambers of Jamaica, a priest of the Diocese of Kingston, and here in Trinidad as the General Secretary of the Antilles Episcopal Conference. We also have with us tonight the Reverend Sonia Hines out of Barbados. We are really happy to have her here with us, Anglican priest and lecturer at Codrington College, and the baby of the group. We have Angelo Quebe, who is out of Trinidad and Tobago working with the Catholic Youth Commission here, a young graphic designer and theologian. Just very happy to be here with us talking about this evening. And so what we're going to do now is go straight to Paba. Paba, as the founder, one of the founders of the CTCT, tell us a little bit about how this organization came to be.
Wow, hello everybody. It's really happy to be here, to think that it was in 1994 that Michelle and Joe Harris and myself, we had been having a lot of discussions in terms of where we're going in the Caribbean. We had challenges. We had the Black Power movement in Trinidad and so forth. Certain attempts had been made by the Caribbean Conference of Churches with what is called the Caribbean Identity Program. We had people like Idris Hamad, who had a number of very interesting, mind-boggling conferences on Caribbean people reflecting on God in the Caribbean situation. But this was ecumenical. And we felt that, somehow as Catholics, although we were involved with the ecumenical movement, that we perhaps had a contribution to make as Catholics. And so we felt the need to come together in some way to do that process. We were actually looking for what we might call an intellectual space of freedom, where we could really make mistakes, sort of talk heresy, whatever. It was for us at the time really an effort at being freely Caribbean thinkers who are committed to church, but who are looking at our reality, looking at our Caribbean situation, and saying, what is God saying to us? So this is really the origin. Joe had studied in Chicago. I was also in Chicago. And Michel, of course, had been doing his work with the School of Literature and so forth in the Caribbean. So when we came back and we started the work, myself at the Pastoral Center, Michel at the Pastoral Center in Trinidad, Joe Harris himself, who was the rector of the seminary of the Holy Ghost Seminary at the time, we were looking for a space where we would not be running into problems with the authorities, the bishops and so. This is why we didn't want it to be kind of officially under the umbrella of the bishops. So we found that space in the Pastoral Centers. The Pastoral Centers were really experimental places where Michel was doing his thing, I was doing my thing, and Joe, as a rector of the Spiritan Seminary, was also attempting some creative thing. So it is out of this kind of effort of Pastoral Centers. The Pastoral Center of Dominica was also allied with us and doing the same kind of thing. It's out of that thinking that the notion of why don't we bring together like-minded men and women of not just religious, but even like artists, intellectuals, university people, and so forth. And that's the origin of the conference. The first conference was held in St. Lucia. We had over almost 70 participants from as far as Suriname. We had them from Barbados, and from Trinidad and Tobago, from Grenada, all around the region. We got our friends together. And that was the birth of the Theology Conference.
Papa, it's amazing that a conference like this has been able to be maintained for this long. I'm sure that you yourself have witnessed a kind of growth and evolution over the years. What have you noticed in terms of that?
Absolutely. When we started, we were very enthusiastic and we were going to get things going. But we soon realized that we had to have some kind of structure. However, we were always reticent to have too much structure because, you see, structure made you vulnerable. That is why, for example, we never had a kind of a leader as such. There were the founders there, but nobody could say this was a leader of the movement. Because as people began to critique what we were doing, people began to react violently, sometimes very violently. I mean, Martin Seju, who in those days was our scribe, used to write articles in the Trinidad Catholic News and so forth. I used to be writing the Chronicle there. And we got a lot of reaction. But the important thing is that they could not target anybody. Mm-hmm. Because, you see, it was a group. It was not saying, that was Papa, or that was Michel, or that was Joe. No, it was Caribbean thinkers all throughout the region. So we found that what we might call non-structure was the structure that kept us going. So we developed what we might call a tradition rather than rules and and things like that. So the effort, what kept the movement going was, I would say, our friendship. We had a deep friendship, a camaraderie, and we were together committed to the task. And as we met, every year when we met, really exciting things began to happen. We began to see the potential. And one person who is very important in this whole movement is the late Professor Robert Schreiter. Bob Schreiter from Chicago was a renowned international theologian. And Bob was saying to us, look, guys, you all are doing something really creative. Bob had been exposed to the Latin American movement, to the African movement, the African theology movement, and so forth. And you're saying, look, in the Caribbean, what you all are doing is very unique and it's interesting. Keep going, keep going. So we had that kind of encouragement from people like Bob. And in fact, we had a number of international theologians who kept us going. So I think in what really, although we realized we needed to have structure, we felt it was important not to let our structure hold us back. So we had a free, a kind of a freedom in our meetings. The basic structure of the meeting was like this, that we're going to rotate. We're not going to go to one place. We're going to every country, every conference, we'd go to a different country. That would expose us to a different church community. That would expose us to a new situation. That was one of the structures we put in. We began to realize how people needed to prepare papers beforehand, send us abstracts on top of it. It took years and years before we ever got that discipline going, But the most beautiful thing was that people were doing things. All kinds of experiments were happening. We had people like in Grenada. We had a brother who was studying mourning ground. In Suriname, we had somebody like Esteban who was looking at funeral rituals in Suriname. We had Michel Francis who was doing St. Lucia. So when we came together, we were not only theologizing upon the word and the context, but we were actually sharing practical experiments and things like that. So this is what made it. So every conference was more and more exciting.
Well, thank you so much for that. And it's wonderful to hear a conference and a space with words like friendship and freedom being used to kind of describe the essence of it, And as we move from our founder to one of the persons who is at the helm right now in terms of Father Don Chambers, at the helm of the present secretariat, perhaps you can shed some light, but a little bit more particularly on this particular conference. It's the 27th inception of the conference since it started in 1994, the first time a virtual conference. Tell us a little bit about this conference, about the theme, a very unique theme, turning the tide. Perhaps you can explain a little bit more about that, Don.
Oh, yes, certainly. The theme conference, the conference of the theme, the COVID effect, turning the tide. I think this theme was inspired by two major factors. The first factor is our experience of the 2019 conference, in which we celebrated our 25th anniversary. And the theme of that conference was confronting the waves. And we used the wave as a Caribbean metaphor for the challenges that our Caribbean people are undergoing historically and presently. And so at that conference, we had musicians, we had educators, catechists, liturgists, theologians, persons coming to reflect on, how is God working through working through and with the Caribbean people in challenging and confronting the waves, whether it's socioeconomic waves, whatever waves. And so 9 months after the 25th conference, we had the inception of COVID-19 pandemic, a period of uncertainty, a period of ambiguity. It was just a very volatile period. And it really was a period of disconnection, so to speak. So in this context, we were reflecting on what is known as the crisis of connection or disconnection that was occurring globally, also regionally. We were looking at the effect, for example, of the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent and what kind of a disconnection that was causing in people's lives. We were looking at crises of connection, such as social, in education. And we felt that the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted some of these disconnections. But at the same time, we were recognizing that while the COVID-19 was highlighting disconnection in our relationships, whether with the environment or among ourselves, we also felt it was an opportunity for reconnection, turning the tide. And we began to see this already occurring in terms of people's relationship with the environment and at the parish level, in families. And hence the theme, the COVID effect, which, yes, highlights the disconnection, highlights a crisis of connection in our lives as Caribbean people. But at the same time, we also saw it was an opportunity for reconnection, for renewal, hence turning the tide.
Yes, fantastic description that, I mean, you kind of tried to sum up two, well, or a year and a little bit more, a crazy year in a few words, trying to link it back to what is we can probably expect to see coming out of the conference. Are there kind of like more specific topics that you think we can expect to look forward to with this conference in particular?
Okay, so certainly, definitely. I believe that we can expect to see creative, interesting, provocative, stimulating, informative presentations. And I just like to highlight a few, of the several presentations that we'll be experiencing. I think, for example, one presentation will be done by a priest from Grenada, Father Hugh Logan. He's going to look at, for example, the disconnection in Caribbean society manifested in the breakdown of the social fabric in Caribbean society as a result of what he calls erosion of trust. And he's going to be reflecting on how can the Psalms, or what he calls Psalms of trust, for example, Psalm 23, how can that psalm be therapeutic and healing and transformative for our Caribbean people? So he's going to be exploring the scripture and its meaning for renewal and reconnection. And then we're also going to have a group of persons, Sister Renee Paul here from Trinidad, and also Gillan Walters Morris and Stefan Degal. They're going to look at education. And as you and I know, education has gotten a battering as a result of the COVID pandemic. Lots of disconnection in the lives of families, parents, students. And so they're going to be looking at the theme of transitioning into a new space in COVID and Catholic education. So they're going to look at how the COVID effect, yes, has battered education and those involved in education, but at the same time, it's allowing for us a new space. And then we'll have another panel consisting of Alison McLeish, Francesca Award, and Gillan Walters Morris. And they're going to be exploring the work of Peter Telfer here in Trinidad. And as you and I, as we know, Peter Telfer is ill in the hospital, and we pray for him at the moment. But they're going to explore his musical composition. And as you know, his musical compositions are filled with, the African rhythm and the African spirituality. One of the famous ones that he composed was "O Creator." Many of you remember that one, which was performed in 1985 at the Mass of John Paul II's visit. So these are just three examples of how not only theologians, but educators, catechists, lay persons, priests will be coming together to reflect on the question of what is God saying to us in the Caribbean today in the midst of this COVID effect.
Yes, and how can someone take part in this? Someone who is not perhaps presenting a paper or making that kind of contribution. How easy is it to take part? And I mean, should this have any appeal for persons who have not studied theology then? They didn't go to school, they have no idea what this is about. I mean, right. What kind of appeal does this have for, the average person who would want to hear more about this?
Yes, certainly. In fact, many of the participants of this movement, as Papa calls it, and many of the participants of this movement have not been trained formally as theologians. Mm-hmm. But what we believe is that because we are people of faith, living that faith in the context of the Caribbean, and because God has given us an intellect, everyone has the capacity to reflect on their faith experience today in the Caribbean, not an abstract faith, but a lived faith. And so, yes, it is open to everyone, theologians, non-theologians, catechists, liturgists, musicians, educators, to be involved. And all that you can do is go to our website, ctct.org, and you will encounter a user-friendly, colorful website that will help you to register.
Yeah, just like our conference members, user-friendly and colorful, right? Pablo, I just want to bring you quickly back into the conversation here, because, you know, as Father Don started to speak about this informal theology, I know that you always had a sense that we were doing our own method here in the Caribbean, you know,
Absolutely.
that it was not an academic theology.
Absolutely. In fact, and the person I would say who whose legacy that really is Michel Levitai. Michel has always told us, look, every Christian really who is trying to live out his or her faith in a reflective way, questioning God, asking why this, why, is doing theology. Because theology is fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. So our people are doing theology all the time. It comes out in the speech, it comes out in the proverbs, it comes out in the for example, like in the North American tradition, the whole Negro spiritual tradition. That is theology. That's people who are reflecting upon their pain and their suffering. So in the Caribbean, people have been doing theology, and Michel has taught us that everybody, what's called pots and pans theology. You know, we have people like Gloria. I feel like Gloria Bertram. You know, who she's cooking. You know, and that is theology.
I love that. How you get pots and pans theology. I love that. Theology,
you know, every day. So in a way, for us, this distinctive from what I call academic theology, done in academia at a university and in conferences and so forth, we say, look, let us provide a space where all of our people who are in fact doing theology can articulate what they're doing, can feel the freedom to share their faith experience so that we can enlighten. And that's one of the contributions that people like Bob Schreiter's always said in terms of our methodology. He's saying, look, you all are doing a fantastic thing, but you're doing theology in a new way. You know, it's the people, it's kind of called people theology. It's people reflecting upon their faith. So in that way, our conference this year, for example, everybody in the world, but in the Caribbean, we are affected somehow by COVID. And we also are people of faith. We have not given up. And so the question is, what is God saying? Where is God in all of this? How can I keep going? What can be? That is the space we want people to come in and reflect. That is theology. That's our way of doing theology, you know. And so the ordinary layperson, anywhere, young people, and they can participate in that process. That's the space we want to provide for them.
Yeah, and I mean, the conference is really unique in that sense. And, you know, it's not just a unique way of doing theology, but I think that there's absolutely no other way for it to be done because of the unique space that it reflects in terms of the Caribbean and what the Caribbean is. And I mean, one of the great things that we have is that we have, because of our historical background in this region, that we have such complexity in this very small space. And so it's not just about the English-speaking Caribbean. We have also had representation from our Dutch brothers and sisters as well, you know. And actually, we're going to hear right now from one of our Dutch members, in the sense of Duncan Wilson from Suriname, and who is right now based in the Netherlands as a religious educator, also a theologian. His heart very much in the Caribbean, and he has some words that he would like to share to invite persons to this unique space. So,
welcome from this beautiful Dutch Caribbean island of Curaçao. Bombini, as the locals say it here in Papiamentu, or in my native Surinamese language, Kanang, Waswit Pona Ini. The COVID pandemic has brought brutal and rough tidings over our Caribbean peoples. This pandemic has certainly made its mark on our region, and we at the Conference on Theology in the Caribbean today are very aware of this. We are called to play our parts. Together we face a challenge to turn the tide for ourselves, our peoples, and our countries. That is why we are hosting a virtual conference on theology in the Caribbean, and that will take place from November the 8th to November the 12th, 2021. Inviting Caribbean and other thinkers, activists, artists, laity and clergy to this conference to reflect on the theme, the COVID effect, turning the tide. Let's come together and take action. Let us do that under the watchful and merciful eye of God the Creator. Let us turn this tide out of love for our Caribbean brothers and sisters. The same kind of love that the late Mr. Z. Wright, a great poet, philosopher, artist, and educator from Curaçao, expressed in one of his popular songs titled Cupido. Throughout this video, we are hearing the beginning tunes of this song from this great artist. Registration is simple and easy via our website and Facebook page. You surely don't want to miss this.
Wonderful welcome there from Duncan, who will be participating in this conference this year, and who will also be looking at the whole topic of healing and kind of framing COVID in the light of the new leprosy. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So there is, our Dutch Caribbean connection coming in there. And right now we're gonna switch a little bit. We're gonna have another voice of the Caribbean, not a Dutch Caribbean woman, but sometimes when we hear this accent, we're not sure if it's English, right? So we welcome Reverend Dr. Sonia Hines, and it's interesting because so far we've been talking a lot of names that are kind of known in the Catholic circle, yet when Papa started, he spoke about this desire for an ecumenical engagement. And so in a special way, we would like to invite Reverend Hines. 25 years this year she celebrates as an Anglican priest out of Barbados. So let's hear how you found yourself in this space.
Well, this is a wonderful space to be in. This is by now, all who are listening are looking forward to get to the website to register to get to this conference. And one of the joys of being Caribbean is that there are these different religious, Christian, I guess, but religious as well, ways of being Caribbean. So when we're talking theology, we know that the Anglicans are in there, the Presbyterians are in there. And so I want to commend the Roman Catholics for this initiative and the founders that got this going. When my sister, who worked at the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute for Social and Economic Research, came across this information, that was when the conference in Suriname was being advertised. She really thought that it was something that would interest me, and that she actually thought that I had known about it. But I must admit that one of the reasons that appealed to me is that I had never visited Suriname and always wanted to go to Suriname. So that was great. So I was ready for it. And I'm sure there are many of my Anglican friends that have heard me say that after I return, you need to get to go to these conferences and be part of this thinking that is so important for us to reflect theologically. The Roman Catholics have named, and you have named some of the Roman Catholics that have been involved. But we have persons that have been involved for a while, including Nolly Clark, John Holder, right? I want to say Leslie Lett, but Leslie Lett was Anglican. I know he's Roman Catholic, so I don't know. But he was Anglican when he was involved in Caribbean theology. Howard Gregory, the Archbishop of
Sion Goodrich.
Sion Goodrich. Yeah. So this is exciting for us to be still part of it, and in fact, it is something that means that we will have to recognize that we all turning the times together.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to the fact that we are honoring one of our Anglican brothers, Canon Nolly Clark, because to me the piece that is so critical to a conference such as this is that it has to be ecumenical. It has to be a conversation where the other people at the table, and you have you're making sure that this happens. And I'm saying it means that the conference has gone to another level. It means that the whole conversation has gone even wider, and more people are at the table for us to hear what God is saying to us in the Caribbean. And so for us, then, it is a conversation that will continue. And I'm really excited, looking forward to being part of it. I'm looking forward to having that fellowship that I experienced in Suriname in 2017. I was able to present a paper, and it really helped me to think as an Anglican, but in a broad context, as I reflected on among persons that were not Anglican. So the fifth mark of mission, for example, is an Anglican way of us trying to do mission. And I was able to bring that from a perspective of what I created as a womanish ecology, a way of looking at nature. So this conference now, I'm sure, is going to bring some more creative minds on the table, some more deep thinkers, and I'm sure that it will go from one stage to another, and sooner or later, we will have to be able to have not just a virtual conference in the Caribbean for Caribbean people, but to me, this conference is going to go to the diaspora, where people again are going to be able to talk about being Caribbean and hearing what God is saying, but not living in the Caribbean. So this is wonderful. I'm totally looking forward to it.
Yes, and I'm feeding off of your excitement, Sonia. I came in at this level, and after hearing you, I'm now pumped. Officially pumped, and I actually want to endorse that kind of level of relating that you spoke to. Well, you know that I would have called upon you to actually guest lecture for a course that I was teaching up at the seminary on feminist theology. And it was fantastic to have your own experience, your own walk, your own journey in terms of being called to the priesthood at a time when this was just not possible, and your openness in terms of being able to share with our seminarians as well as our lay students here. So I appreciated the connections and the friendship that has really followed from that as well. And we're going to bring Father Don. We're going to bring you back into the conversation just in case you fell asleep. Because actually this year we are going to be paying particular attention in terms of the Idris Hamad lecture. So I don't know if you would like to share a little bit about that. It's part and parcel of what you will find in this conference space. And this year we continue with the Idris Hamad lecture, a little bit about how this lecture came to be and what peculiar turn it's going to take this year.
Yes, certainly. And I'm going to ask Papa to help me out here, in speaking about the Idris Hamad lecture, at least the beginning. But before I go there, I'd like to say that picking up on Sonia's contribution is that this year, the Universal Church and the local church will start what is called a synodal process or a synodal journey. And one of the elements of this journeying together that Pope Francis has been highlighting is that the journey is not just about Catholics journeying together, but it's about all those who are baptized in Christ journeying together. And he speaks specifically, and he's been challenging local churches specifically to engage our ecumenical brothers and sisters in that journey of discerning what's the Spirit saying to the church. And so I'm saying this to say that CTCT has been living out a synodal spirit for the last 20 odd years, including our ecumenical brothers and sisters in this journey of discerning the movements of the Spirit in the Caribbean. And it's in light of that the Idris Hamad lecture came about in the turn of the century. As you know, Idris Hamad was a Presbyterian minister, and he was also a principal of the Presbyterian College, Theological College here in Trinidad, St. Andrews. But he also worked with the Caribbean Conference of Churches. And he's really considered, the father of Caribbean theology because of the innovative work that he did, some of which was published, Troubling the Waters, Out of the Depths, among others. And so I'm going to ask Pablo to pick up here now about this lecture, the lecture and how it started, and why Idris Hamad?
I think in search of new perspective, which is Idris's seminal paper, that is really what we call the origin, the beginning of reflection that we call in Caribbean theology. And Idris was the one who, on behalf of the identity program of the CCC, coordinated the series of workshops, out of which came Out of the Depths, Troubling of the Waters, and so forth. So he was the one who he coordinated workshops and he edited them. And in a way, his seminal paper, In Search of New Perspectives, really set the tone for all theological reflection subsequently. And that is why we felt a number of us were involved in the process in those workshops. People like Clyde Harvey, Everett Johnson, Terry Julian, Michael Johnson, yes. We were all involved in those conferences. And we felt that his initiative was really something that put us on a new trajectory. And it is in honor of that kind of grounding in our Caribbean experience and Caribbean reality in our theological reflection that we felt that Idris should really somehow be a model for us. And so we designed this lecture that we call the Idris Hamad lecture, which will always have an element of ecumenism in it. We wanted that kind of perspective. And it's interesting that you're talking about inviting Sonia to lecture at the seminary, but Nolly Clark taught church history at the seminary. So that tradition has been there. And this ecumenical relationship, which Idris started in our minds, really, we wanted to honor that and to keep it before us. That is why we instituted this Idris Hamad lecture, which will always have an ecumenical perspective, not just ecumenical, but also interreligious.
Yes.
Because I think the work of Martin Sidju has been doing tremendous work in that whole area, bringing in the Hinduism and Hindu reflection and so forth. That kind of breadth of vision is what Idris Hamad stood for. And by honoring him in that lecture, it gives us a scope to maintain our focus on that broadening. What you talk about, Francis's concept of broadening, opening out.
Yeah, and I think a wonderful continuation that we've been able to do with that is particularly what will be happening this year, in the sense of making that extra effort to ensure that we have that interreligious participation, and also in the honoring of someone like Father Nolly Clark. Father Nolly is celebrating 60 years as a priest. For us in Trinidad and Tobago, we are really quite blessed to have been, witness to Nolly's witness, so to speak. There's really kind of nowhere that he kind of has not been able to touch, not just within his own space, but as you said, he taught at the seminary. Many Catholics are his disciples. I count myself as a little Nolly Clark disciple as well. And his willingness to really enter into those spaces that very few would go. I think it's really a tremendous witness and service that he has given to our community here in Trinidad and beyond. It truly is a Caribbean son of the soil. And we are really happy to have him be with us and that we have that opportunity to award him and honor him in this way.
But not only that, but Adana, Nolly is the living link with people like Roy Hall, Cottrell Davis, all of those early founders of the CCT movement, and he was there with them and he's still here with us. That's why it's so important for us to honor him.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'd like to talk about just briefly, Adana, this year's Idris Hamad lecture, which is going to take on a kind of a different style. In the past, the lectures were either done by one person, but this year we are going to be using a panel of persons, representatives from various religious groups throughout the Caribbean, the Rastafarians, the First People of Dominica, Hindus, Muslims, Catholic, Presbyterians. And what we've asked them to do is to reflect with us on how their respective faith tradition have been responding to the COVID effect. Mm-hmm. How has the COVID effect impacted on them, impacted on worship, impacted on their theology, impacted on their faith, and how are they responding? So we'll be hearing from these various religious groups throughout the Caribbean on how COVID has impacted them and how they have responded.
Yeah, I think this is crucial. I think that it's been quite obvious how we've been negatively impacted. What I am looking forward to is the opportunities and the possibilities that this time has also given rise to in terms of our faith traditions. Right. So I'm really looking forward to that. And now we're going to toss over to the baby among us. I am anxious to go here because, I'm sure everybody's kind of wondering, what is he doing here? Not a priest, not trying to be a minister, not trying to be a nun, but still very much interested and has a fantastic passion for theology. I would just love to hear this story. I don't know how you end up here, but now is your time to tell us. Welcome, Angelo Quebe.
Hi, good night, everyone. So how I ended up here? Well, literally, I ended up here because Adana called me a day. But what I think is the beautiful thing about that is that when I was in Form 6, Adana was my teacher.
Why you dating my man?
But yeah, I couldn't feel any more, I guess, blessed and honored to be a part of this space right now. So, the baby and the families always get all the love, right? So I think I very much feel that in a very real way. So, when I left Trinidad to go study abroad in Miami, and that was at Barry University, and that's where I fell in love with theology. Now, the first time I ever heard the word theology was actually with you, Adana, right? But I didn't know what it was, and I never even bothered to look any further into it. I grew up with a lot of questions about my Catholic faith, But anytime I would ask, I would often be met with things like, don't question faith, that's just the way it is. God make it so. All different kind of resistance I would face, right? I never let go of my questions, but I never bothered to get at least publicly question anymore, because I felt like, okay, this is the way it is, even though something deep inside of me telling me like there must be more than, this sort of surface level thinking, right? Went to Barry, sat down in a theology class, the intro class, and that was it. I was sold. I really felt like I need to pursue this. I need to follow this, because every question I had growing up started to be answered. Now, for every answer I got, about 1,000 more questions arose, right? But I couldn't help but fall deeper and deeper in love with it, right? So I studied it more, ended up graduating with my BA in theology. And a year later, in 2016, went back to study my master's in theology, in practical theology and ministry. And as I was wrapping up to move back to Trinidad, I did feel a bit of hesitation, a bit of fear. I was like, I feel so free within my university space, here with the Dominicans. And, I could ask any question that would never be considered too outlandish. It would actually raise a conversation rather than feel like fire and brimstone about to pour down on me, right? So, yeah, there was a lot of hesitation, a little bit of fear too. Like, what am I going to do when I go back to Trinidad? Like, I kind of going back to a place where I can't really question. But this is what I've come to believe so strongly, But as I came back here, I started getting more involved in church. And then Adana introduced me to the CTCT. Like I was just thinking tonight when Paba was giving us, the history and the introduction of the CTCT. And, the joy I feel on the inside too, to just be a part of this conference. It's not that I'm too young or anything like that, but rather I was welcomed with open arms to be able to do what I love, to be able to, seek to understand my faith, without judgment, without fear of condemnation. I couldn't be happier to be here.
Oh, that's where you do a little heart.
My little heart.
I think it's we have also benefited from you being part of this space, with your novel ideas and ways to approach things. One of that being this youth segment, this youth forum that we are going to be having for the first time, and we hope that this will be a permanent fixture in the conference. Could you tell us a little bit about this youth forum space that will be taking place this year?
Well, I would love for it to be a permanent fixture, because this is the first time that the conference will be having a space dedicated to the youth. And I mean, we have some big names presenting in this conference, right? I mean, we have Father Don, we have people like Sister Annette, like, Alison McCletchy, the amount of big names we have presenting. So it is definitely an honor to at least be in this space. But what I do think is that, as young people, we would like to be able to present at least in a concentrated moment as well. Not because we're trying to separate ourselves or anything, but rather that we would like to present our energy in full force, right? And we invite in everyone part of the conference and, people outside of the conference to come to join to see, what it is we have to say. We have people, well, like myself, we have Shirat Almandoz, Matthew Broren, who was a student here at the seminary, Father Michael Woodruff, a recently ordained priest. We have Teresa Best Downs, the Episcopal Delegate for Youth. We have a good amount of young people this year presenting, and we have a lot to say. We want to do theology too. We want to question and seek to understand our faith in the exact same way. So to be able to do this in this space, we hoping that it would help to bring more young people, because, when you hear the word theology, it's kind of like, what is that? This foreign sort of concept, like, oh no, that's just for priests, right? And maybe a couple nuns, like a few brave women. And it's like, well, no, like Pablo was saying, everyone could do theology, and we all do. Anyone that seeks and questions, we are all doing theology. So young people very much have that ability and that sense. So to be able to do it here now in this youth space, yeah, we have a biased, but I'm probably most excited for this youth segment we have coming up.
Yes, and it has the potential to be a wonderfully liberating space for us as well, those of us who wouldn't call ourselves youth necessarily, in terms of being able to learn as well. Because sometimes when you're circled by the same kinds of persons, same kinds of thought, not wanting for that to happen, you can become a little bit closed in your thinking and in your thoughts. And I think that this would be a wonderful opportunity to really liberate the space again and to really make sure it serves what it was meant to. And as we have this youth segment, we also have a creatives segment. Pablo would have said that at the beginning. This space is no stranger to gathering cultural activists, artists, and this year we also want to have a very particular space for that. Angelo, could you speak to that as well?
Sure. As a creative, as well as a theologian, I'm definitely looking forward to the creative space as well, where I think naturally all of us here in the Caribbean are very creative people, whether or not we believe it. We as a people are very creative. And, we'll be having 2 nights of creative displays, and it's not simply just painting or drawing, but, we are going to have poetry and music and a bunch of different cultural artifacts to really showcase what we as a Caribbean people have to offer. So this conference isn't going to simply be, a bunch of lectures and talks and, what the stereotypical idea of what theology seems to be like. No, it's going to be a lot more than that. There's something here but I would say for everyone, people who are very much interested in the academic theology side, as well as, it's going to be more than just simple high level concepts. Like, it is very rooted and very real in our current pandemic experience. Like, nobody is immune to this pandemic. So I'm very curious and very interested to see the sort of art that comes out of this 1.5 year long and still continuing struggle.
Yes, because the Caribbean space has benefited so much from our artists, and I like the fact that you kind of blown open this term to art, because even the way that we prepare food is art, the way we talk is art, and it really allows for another dimension of being able to encounter the divine. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a wonderful space for us to have to be able to explore these things. I think, Don, your paper would kind of be looking at the work of Jackie Hinkson, a famous Trinidadian artist who has often tapped into his own religious sensibility in his artwork.
Right, yeah, and I've been having an ongoing conversation with Jackie Hinkson about his works, particularly his works that is called Back in Times. It's a series of paintings he has done, very interesting, where, according to the way he puts it, the principle that he's using is that he's going back to the stories of Jesus Christ, Jesus's birth, the Last Supper, the crucifixion, and he is using that to have a conversation with what is happening in contemporary Trinidad, with what we call the crises of connection, the social crises, the religious crises, the violence, the crime. And what he says he's doing is creating this marriage or this conversation between an event that took place 2,000 years ago and today. And so his work is, he says, it's going back and forth. It's going back and forth. So I've started this conversation with him because I believe that art serves two purposes, and I see it in Jackie Hinson's work. Number one, art critiques what is happening in society today. It also helps us to interpret the social and economic and the context that we're living in. But at the same time, I believe that art is also an expression of the divine. How is God in this particular context? How is the artist understanding God today in the Caribbean, in a situation of disconnection? So I'm looking at, my paper isn't finished, my reflection isn't finished, because I'm having this ongoing conversation with Jackie Hinkson, and I've had one conversation with him, and I hope to have others. And it's just fascinating to see how the power of art and the theology coming together.
Yes. Well, I am quite excited for that as well. I wouldn't call myself an artist, but I really do feel quite drawn to connect to the divine in that way. I mean, my own prayer space often happens in the middle of carnival, in the middle of a fete, in the middle of me with my costume. Yeah. These have been some of my most sacred spaces, and as we come to the end of tonight's media launch for that conference from November 8th to 12th, and we just kind of conclude this evening, we just want to kind of make yet another invitation to you out there, if you haven't yet done so, to register for this conference. And the information is on the screen right now. Go to our website, CTCTtoday.org. Register. It's a very easy registration process. The cost is $300 for the conference, and this year you have a special day pass of $100 to just come for the day. But we really want to encourage you to take in the full conference. And our students are free, or 75 plus years are free. Fun is free at this conference. Caribbean love is free. So come on, register for this conference. And we would be really looking forward to really getting, because it's the first time we're having a virtual space, of getting much wider reach than we would originally. So as we come to the end, I just want to thank our power panel today of Pava, Dawn, Sonia, Angelo. We are wishing all of you a very good night. We also want to thank all the persons that have kind of been behind the scenes working to make this evening possible. We thank Lauren, we thank Greg of Trinity TV. We thank Brad and Jazz. You know who you are. They've been very helpful working behind the scenes with us, and as well as those members who, have been with us from the start in 1994 and have really been quite devoted to this space. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to this conference, November 8th to 12th. Register today.
And just to clarify, it's 300 TT and $50 US.
Yes. Yeah, I forgot my currencies. Yeah, and I'm talking in this international global reach. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay.